Alright, geometry students, so this is the second part of our review of slope. And this time we're going to be taking a closer look at the slope of parallel and perpendicular lines. So we should be able to discover and apply relationships between these special slopes. So we are going to take a look at the slopes of parallel lines and how they're related, the slopes of perpendicular lines and what we call opposite or negative reciprocals, and we're going to do a little bit of practice. We're going to decide whether lines are parallel, perpendicular, or neither based on their slopes. Make sure that you're following along with your notes, and let's get started. So let's first talk about parallel lines. So we know from previous lessons that parallel lines will never intersect, and that's because parallel lines have the same slope. They have the same slope always. And remember that our symbol for parallel looks like this. And so some examples of some parallel lines, well, you might have the equation of the line y equals 2x plus 4 and y equals 2x minus 3. So these lines have the exact same slope, the slope of 2, but they're never going to intersect because their y-intercepts are different. So if you graphed these lines, use just an example. It doesn't have to be too pretty, but let's say the y-intercept of my first line is 4, and the y-intercept of my second line is -3, somewhere down here, and they're going to have the same slant, something like this. Same slant, same direction, will never intersect. So let's talk about perpendicular lines. Perpendicular lines are much different. They have very different slopes, but they have a special relationship. Perpendicular lines have what we call opposite reciprocal slopes. And the symbol we use for perpendicular would be kind of like an upside down T. This is perpendicular. That means that these two lines, when graphed on a coordinate plane, are going to intersect at a 90-degree angle. And so what I mean by opposite reciprocal slopes is we're going to flip the fraction of the slope, and we're going to change the sign, meaning we're changing from a negative to a positive or positive to a negative. So again, here are some examples. The number 3/4, the opposite or negative reciprocal of that, well, we're going to change the sign, and then we're going to flip this fraction over. So that becomes -4/3. -4/3 and 3/4 are opposite reciprocals. Looking at number 2, if we find the opposite or negative reciprocal of 2, well, it might help us to write 2 as a fraction over 1. So we would change the sign, make it negative, and then flip the numerator and the denominator of this fraction. So 2 over 1 would be -1/2. -7/8. The opposite reciprocal would be changing the sign, so it's now a positive number, and then flipping the fraction, 8/7. +1, if we flip the fraction, change the sign, would become -1. And here's an interesting one. Definitely pay attention to this one. We know that a slope of 0 means a horizontal line, right? So that means that the opposite reciprocal would be a vertical line, or the line would be vertical with an opposite reciprocal slope. So let's say we have the number 0 over 8. 0 divided by 8 will always be 0, right? If we flip the fraction and change the sign, it's just going to be negative 8 over 0. And we can't divide by 0. So the slope would be undefined. Very important to remember. Horizontal and vertical lines will always be perpendicular to each other. So let's practice. We're going to decide, using these points, if the lines are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. So I'm given A, B, C, and D. So first I want to find the slope of line AB. And remember, to find the slope of any line, you take the y values of your 2 points and subtract them from each other, y2 minus y1, divided by x2 minus x1, which is your 2x values subtracted from each other. So to find the slope of AB, let's take the y value 6 minus 8 divided by 2 minus negative 1. So 6 minus 8 is negative 2. 2 minus negative 1 is just 2 plus 1. That's positive 3. So our slope would be negative 2/3. And now let's compare it to the slope of line CD. So line CD, if we're looking at points C and D, we're subtracting our y values. That would be 3 minus 2 divided by 3 minus negative 1. And that's going to be 3 minus 2 is 1, 3 plus 1 is 4. So the slope of line CD is 1/4. Now these numbers aren't the same, and they're also not opposite reciprocals of each other. So we're going to say that these lines are neither. They are neither parallel nor perpendicular. Let's try out number 4. We're given the following 4 points that represent lines AB and CD. Let's find the slope of line AB. That's going to be 4 minus 3, y value subtracted, divided by negative 1 minus 2. 4 minus 3 is 1, negative 1 minus 2 is negative 3. Our slope is negative 1/3. For line CD, the slope will be, let's take D minus C, 6 minus 3, divided by negative 4 minus negative 5, or in other words, negative 4 plus 5. 6 minus 3 is 3, negative 4 plus 5 is positive 1. Our slope is 3. So what I'm seeing here is I'm seeing negative 1/3 and positive 3, or positive 3 over 1. These numbers are opposite reciprocals. These lines are perpendicular to each other. Wherever they intersect, it will be at a 90-degree angle. Number 10, I've given these points. Let's find the slope of line AB. And that would be negative 4 minus 1, change in y, divided by 3 minus 3, change in x. And I get negative 5 over 0. That is undefined. I'm going to abbreviate here. This is an undefined slope because we cannot divide by 0. Line CD. Okay, slope of line CD would be 5 minus 1 divided by negative 4 minus negative 4, or in other words, negative 4 plus 4. 5 minus 1 is 4. Negative 4 plus 4 is 0. We have yet another undefined slope. So if both of these lines have undefined slopes, that means they're both vertical lines. That means they have to be parallel to each other. Even though undefined isn't a number, it's the same slope. We're still trying to divide by 0 on both of these slopes. So, parallel lines it is. For additional practice on these types of problems, telling whether lines are parallel, perpendicular, or neither, look at problems 1, 2, and then 5 through 9. So that is our lesson. We learn all about the slopes of parallel and perpendicular lines. Make sure that you're trying out a few practice problems. Check your answers with mine in Topic 2 notes in the content library, and ask for support if you need it. Thank you again for watching this video.